Would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. I was going to start off with, more national news, but there's something that had been bugging me after I first heard the reports, and the reason why it bugs me is it's something that I brought up before. I probably haven't brought it up in recent time, but I have brought it up before about how it seems like you have these, trendy people that they want to follow Europe or the UK or Britain. They idolize the Queen and the princes and princesses, and they have that fairy tale look at the whole situation, not knowing what, the people in UK are actually going through. Definitely, the people that have been there generations, where their freedom of speech, their freedom of movement within their own country is being sidelined to be politically correct. And I've warned people here in America, don't play the PC game. And it bugs me because you watch it grow and grow. It went from gay, transvestite, lesbian, queer, that, and now there's 90 different gender is what they call it, when in reality there's not. You can make up names for your fetishes, but that doesn't always mean that's a gender. A gender is pretty specific, where what they're calling gender now isn't. But what is gender if you can just call yourself whatever? What does gender represent when I can just change my gender whenever? It doesn't represent anything anymore. Because now we don't use science or anything to go, hey, you're this gender or you're that gender. They go, well, it's whatever you feel like. Oh, you feel like a dog today? Guess what? You're a dog. Like, no, that's not a gender. It blows my mind. And then, it really started irking me when I heard some news of things that happened in Great Britain with some activists / journalists / commentary people that are on the right side, or they're what they call alt-right people, which some of these people I highly disagree with on many things. Just like I do the students sitting here, screaming BS about, how these gun laws will protect them, when common sense gun laws. We have a right to, protest and speech and blah, 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 but you don't have a right to defend yourself with your firearm because, well, we have a right to be safe in school. Whoa, right to be. Okay, you need to go back to school and figure out what a right is. No one has a right to safety. Absolutely zero people have a right to safety. They have a right to protect themselves, to keep themselves safe, whatever means possible. But you don't have a right to lock everybody up to keep yourself safe or take everybody else's rights to keep yourself safe. That's not a right. It's a right of you as a human being, whether you're the student, the teacher, the parent, or the stranger walking down the road, to protect yourself. That's a right. So to claim that you have a right to feel safe, so you're not fighting for gun laws. In reality, what you're fighting for is a safe space. And we'll get to that later on in the broadcast because I want to get back to this whole Britain thing because we tend to allow the trendy people, of course, the Hollywood elites, they like Britain because, well, they're like lords. They're lords of the manor type people. They would be considered elitists in that type of society. They already are. So you can't look at them when you actually want to see reality. Look at where the average middle class or poverty level people are. That's when you start seeing the truth. But we don't see the media going, you don't see U.S. media going, well, here's the poor person or the middle class person and how they feel in Britain. Only time you see mainstream media put Britain up there, it's, the princess and the prince and the queen, Then they want to play some, what's that princess movie that's out? I don't even remember. Frozen, I think it is. Yeah, whatever. That's what they want to portray to you because they want you to go, we need to be more like Great Britain. We need free health care. We need to let all the immigrants in. That might be going okay for the king, the queen, or elites within, the UK, but that's not how it's going for the average person. The average person, a lot of them have been ran out of their communities that their great grandfathers grew up in, that they grew up in, their parents grew up in, generations. Well, we let a whole bunch of immigrants in, and we're not having them assimilate. We're just allowing them to create their own country within our country, and they'll operate on their laws. And well, if you go into their community, we're not going to protect you. Well, hold on, isn't that Britain? And then that's where you start seeing the hypocrisy within Britain and that political correctness. So you can't say anything bad about a Muslim that's doing bad things. Oh, you're a Christian? Are you a radical Christian? As a Christian, would you run over a Muslim with a truck? Well, of course not. Well, you might be a terrorist. Well, there was someone that was interviewed about that, and this coming out of Britain, where it's actually the complete opposite. They're having issues multiple times of Muslims in vehicles trying to take out people. It's not been Christians running over Muslims. It's been Muslims running over Christians. And I have Muslim friends, and they look at this radical and they're like, why aren't they trying to stop it? They get upset because they're saying, hey, by allowing whoever the hell that claims they're, Muslim to come into the country, you're having terrorists come into the country because they're unwilling to check, and they're mad because that makes them look bad. I remember going to high school with a Muslim that, I went over to his house and stuff. And even though they really held on to their culture, they also assimilated. They embraced the American culture while still holding on to their culture. And they didn't believe the type of things that these radicals believe. And really, I feel bad for the genuine good people out there that are Muslim. Because allowing a unchecked flow of immigrants from a area that has a high density of radicalization. And I would say the same thing if it was a Christian community that was running around, killing off Muslims or killing off, any religion or race. And then another thing that really peed me off. If you speak out about a religion, you're racist. And I brought this up a long time ago. And what it got to me was, they go, well, they were trying to kill, Hitler was trying to kill off a whole race of people. Well, I didn't know Judaism was a race. I believe it to be a religion. And throughout the years, it's gone that way, They say Christians are the white people. I know a lot of black people. I know Native American. I know black people, Asian people. I know about every race that claims to be Christian. So, yeah, it's not a white thing. And if you believe what they have a lot of people teaching out there now, I don't know if it's real. I never met the guy, so I don't know, but they claim Jesus was black or brown. Or who knows? I don't know. I know what area he came from. I also know that in the area he came from, multiple races actually, interacted. The Middle East has always been a big trading point, along with, a lot of the area that surrounded the Mediterranean area. Greece, Italy, all that area has been a trading ground, and you'd find multiple races in a lot of the ports. So I really don't know. You had Roman soldiers there. He could have been white. I don't know. I never met the guy, so hey, But again, they're construing religion with race, and then they're using this. So they're saying that if you speak out against any religion, unless it's Christianity, but if you speak out about any Muslim or any other religion, well, that would be racist. I think they were speaking about the religion, not the race. That, and a lot of times they're speaking about the radicalized side of the religion, which then only points to a percentage of the Muslims that have been radicalized. But then they're claiming that it's the Christians that are the radicals. And I'll get into this more. I do want to play this clip. It's Lauren Southern, and she was banned at the border from entering the UK. So she has been banned, along with others. Brittany, I can't remember her name. Penny, oh, now I'm going to forget. Give me a second, I can pull it up here. I don't want to get the last name wrong here. Give me a second. Pettibone. Brittany Pettibone. So they both were banned, along with another gentleman from the UK, and they claimed it was racism because they found something about a religion. And to find that something about a religion, they claim that they were starting a terrorist investigation on them. This is Britain. Because she doesn't agree with a religion. And it's not even that she was disagreeing, she was just showing hypocrisy in the one thing that they found to ban her after they were investigating her for terrorism. But then, once they found something to ban her, terrorism don't mean nothing anymore, because really we were just holding you to find something to keep you from coming into the country. Because they're trying to stop any dissent, any knowledge. And it's getting really hard for journalists to cover it. The ones that are willing to cover the bad stuff that's happening in Britain right now because of their policies. And a lot of it comes back to the EU, even though Brexit was supposed to happen. Theresa May is just dragging it along with some of the other government. So it sounds like they're in bed with the EU rather than putting their country first. They're supposed to put their country first and then the EU. But again, EU takes all their power, basically makes them hand over their power. I'd recommend for Britain to get the hell out of the EU fast. I mean, treat it like a burning building. Get the hell out of there. Because otherwise, the burning building will be Britain. Because honestly, I think they're trying to push even more within Britain alone, just for the simple fact that they're trying to exit. But I think the EU wants to create chaos within Europe using the immigrants and knowing that radicals are getting in. Knowing. You would have to be an idiot to not know these radicals are getting in. So they know that this is going on. Don't let them lie to you. They know this is going on. You'd have to be blind not to see it. Well, why would they allow it to keep happening if they know what's going on? It's the EU. The EU, in the long run, wants to get rid of the national governments of the countries that are a part of the EU, so they can finally consolidate it within the EU Parliament. Well, how can they do that? Well, if all the countries they're having all these problems, well, that's why the EU was created. We'll just have to come in and fix it all for all these countries. Just hand over your sovereignty. I guarantee you right now they already have a plan written up to take care of that problem. They don't care how many people get hurt or die in the process of creating this chaos, so they can come in with the already written plan to save all these countries by putting them under EU only. There won't be a France, a Great Britain, a Germany. They want EU. And I think a lot of people like Theresa May and, Chancellor of Germany, all these people have sold out. They know what's going on, and they're not standing against it. And then I'm not a huge nationalist, because nationalist is still, you're still putting a strong central government in charge of things they have no experience, knowledge, or connection to. But what would be worse than that national one is a continental. Even though I think the U.S. government is completely corrupt, not obeying the Constitution that's supposed to outline what they're allowed to do, completely ignoring that, I still think it would be worse if we had an unelected government that decided to go, well, now we're not going to, look at the United States. We're going to look at all of America. Canada, the U.S., Mexico, Brazil, Guatemala, no, we don't need a bigger central government. We need a smaller central government. We need more localized government rather than federal, national, continental. So I want to get into this. I'm not going to play the whole thing because it is around an hour long. But I do want to get definitely into this first half of it. Then I have an article I want to cover right after this. So let's go ahead and get into this, and we'll get into that article right after this.
/Lauren and about Southern. It doesn't look like you're out. I know you're out. Doesn't look like you're out. What's happened? What's been going on?
Yeah. So I'm still in Calais right now. I guess they never really prepare you for what occurs when you get banned from a country. I didn't really think about it, but in my case, they literally just plopped me on the other side of a border fence and said, au revoir. And I would just kind of was left there like the guy from Pulp Fiction looking around. I don't know where to go. It's early in the morning. Nothing's open. Walked around for an hour, found a McDonald's to sit in. But you probably want to jump long before that to the beginning of all this shenanigans where I was detained and banned from the UK at the Calais border crossing.
Yeah. What was going on? Of course, you knew what happened with Brittany and her boy. So what was how did you feel heading in? How did you feel stepping up to the fine, friendly cats behind the glass? What was going on?
So, of course, I had heard a few days before I decided to cross the border into the UK. I had plans to meet Brittany. I had plans to meet Tommy. I was going to end my trip and then head back to Toronto. And I figured maybe I would be stopped and questioned at the border because of what happened with Brittany and Martin. But I did not expect what ended up happening. So when I got to the border crossing, I had taken a bus. They gave me a double take when they scanned the passport and said, you need to wait here. I need to check some things. Went to the back. Took them about 15 minutes. Then they told me to get my luggage off the bus and bring it in. They searched it all, put it in a locked room, and then put me in a detention center, basically. I guess they have like a garden there. You got some washrooms, some biscuits, Quran or Bible, whatever you like. And they took me in for questioning. Now, I thought it was just going to be basic level questioning, kind of like what Brittany and Martin went through, although theirs was pretty crazy. They were gone for like 3 days. But once the border guards were done with me, just the regular border guards, I was called out of the detention center by the UK police, who handed me this form. And it says, Schedule 7 Terrorism Act 2007. And they gave me a serious look and said, we need to inform you now that you are being investigated under the Terrorism Act, and we are going to take you in for questioning. These are all your rights. Read through this. You have one call you can make. After this, you're ours for questioning and detainment. And it just kind of hit me like, This is not the same situation that Brittany and Martin went through. They were not detained for terrorism. What have I done? What memes did I post?
Based on truth in advertising, Lauren, these are your rights. Was the word rights in quotes or not so much?
I don't even think they said these are your rights. It was just like, this document tells you what's going to happen and what's going on with you. I can't remember exactly, so I don't want to get anything wrong here, so I'm not sure exactly what was said there, but got this document, tried to read through it before I went into questioning, and to be honest, I'd be lying a bit if I said it wasn't a tiny bit fun, because I did kind of get to use a lot of the knowledge that I learned from watching interrogation movies and watching libertarian videos about how to protect your rights. And I went in there and it was almost exactly like a movie. They took me into a small little warm room. They had that giant recording device on the table, their notebooks, 3 cops with the whole professional bulletproof jacket and everything. And they turned on the tape recorder, made me say my name, and began the interrogation. And it was one of the most bizarre lines of questioning I have ever been through in my life. They asked me what my political ideology was. They confiscated my speech and went through that in another room, a speech I gave to Belgian nationalists, Flemish nationalists. They asked me about my friends, Tommy Robinson. Then one of the most bizarre ones is they asked me about my religion, and when I said Christian, they asked me if I was a Christian extremist, how radical of a Christian am I? And right after that, they asked me how I felt about running over Muslims with a truck. And
as Christians do.
I literally started laughing. I was like, generally a pretty awful thing to do. I didn't even know how to respond, and I had to apologize. I was like, I'm sorry for laughing. It's just, this is insanity. I even mentioned to them, I'm like, I think you're questioning your priorities are a little mixed up. How often do you see, and I kind of gave them a bit of my thoughts on that, and they said, we have problems with right-wing terrorism too, and we need to deal with that. How do you feel about right-wing terrorism? It's all over my social media. I've condemned right-wing terrorism. I've said, I don't care who is doing it, killing people, running over people, whatever, it is wrong. They could just go and look at my social media and not detain me and question me on this for hours. So that was a big part of it. But another big part was they really wanted to see my cell phone and my laptop. And they told me, they were like, you need to give us your phone code right now. We need to go through your phone. And I said, no, I refused. They said, okay, if you don't give us your phone code, because you're under the Schedule 7, we can basically do whatever we want. So if you don't give us your phone code, we're going to take it for 7 days. You're going to be sent in to have your blood taken, fingerprints, mugshots, and be put away in a safe location. And we're going to get our hackers in to download all of your phone contents anyways. So you give us your phone code, or this is going to be a whole heck of a lot worse for you, basically. I said, go right ahead. I want legal representation. I'm not giving you my code. Go right ahead. So that actually worked. I never had to give them my phone code. The legal representation really messed them up. They couldn't get in touch with a solicitor for me. It's like hours of me sitting in this hot room, them bringing me water, trying to get me in touch with legal representation. I don't know. It was just a very bizarre situation. But the thing that really... So this has been about 3 hours of questioning. They gave me a few questions after I asked for a solicitor, and they couldn't find me one. They promptly ended the interview and said, we've got a call from UK border enforcement or border forces or something. You need to come out right now with us. And then I sat in the detention center, and they brought me a form that said, you've been banned from the UK for racism, for handing out racist pamphlets. So my kind of 3-hour questioning period with the counterterrorism was ended because they just banned me. But this is an interesting tidbit, because I spoke to a lawyer today who said it almost sounds as though they used the Schedule 7 Terrorism Act to detain me for long enough to find something to ban me from the country for. So that's what the legal advice I was talking to said, that's what it sounds like happened, because they just ended the terrorism investigation as soon as they found a reason to ban me from the country.
Wait,
so,
sorry, are you trying to say that a law that was brought in to protect people against terrorism ends up being used against non-terrorists? That the scope of the entire government program has expanded way beyond its original mandate, in fact, kind of ignores its original mandate and is targeting the innocent. Boy, there's one for the history books.
Yeah, so I'm going to look into that more, but based on my experience, because I thought it was very bizarre. I was like, suddenly you don't care about me running over masses of people with my truck when you found a reason to ban me? That's a little bizarre. So that explanation makes a lot of sense to me. But the explanation to ban me certainly did not make a lot of sense, considering the racist allegations were regarding an incident last month where I went to go film a video in Luton. We were doing social experiments where we were planning on kind of spinning off a Vice article that claimed Jesus Christ was a gay man, or argued that he was a gay man. And we were like, oh, let's try this with other religions and see how people react, to show how silly Vice is. And we were going to do in front of a few different religious buildings, like, your God is gay, and see if some people had conversations, see if some people stole the banners. We ended up just doing the Islam one because people got very mad and we had a pretty crazy day regarding it, and we never got around to doing the other ones, so we were waiting to do those before we published it. But those Islam posters that said Allah is a gay god were the reason I was banned from the country under claims of racism. Now, I'm not sure what part of Allah is a gay god has anything to do with racism, but that's what my form that I've got right here says. So.
Now, I wonder if the people who had made the article or the argument that Jesus was gay, I wonder if they would be banned from the UK for racism as well, or I'm going to guess not so much.
No, I somehow doubt that. But I don't even think it has to do with the forums. I don't think it has to do with them thinking I'm racist or any of that. Well, maybe, but I think it's more so that they are afraid. Tommy Robinson has just gone independent, and he is planning on taking Europe by storm. He's been doing interviews with Brittany Pettibone. The right wing in Europe is no longer afraid of being silenced. They've already had their cars burned down. They've already had their friends punched in the face and had to get in battles on the street. They've already had them slander and silence. They've dealt with it all. They don't care anymore. The right wing is becoming more and more popular in Europe, and I think they are afraid of it. And Tommy Robinson is a big target for the UK. They're very afraid of what he is capable of in spreading the truth, quite frankly, about what is happening there with immigration. Brittany Pettibone and Martin would have helped bolster his message. I planned on going there to help bolster his message, so they found ridiculous reasons to ensure we could never come to that country and help them with that. And that's just my opinion. That's why I think it happened. I think it's far too coincidental that Brittany and Martin 2 days before me were going to meet with Tommy, and then I was going to meet with Tommy. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, and of course that means that they're tracking what you guys are planning. They're putting you into databases and, having this big, cold 1984 Sauron eye staring at your every online move. Kind of an odd experience, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm just processing. I'm still processing a little because I didn't sleep much last night. They kept me up all night doing the questioning process. It's certainly not a point in my life that I ever thought I would reach. I never thought I would be dragged into a room and questioned under terrorism legislation. I feel very bad for my father, who didn't get to speak to me but got a call from an officer at 4 a.m. saying your daughter is being detained under international terrorism acts. It's not a good time for him. This is not a future that I expected to have to face. And I think that's a big thing that you probably have to deal with, Stefan, is you talk about these futures that we're going to have to face, and everyone calls you insane, everyone calls you crazy, everyone says you're exaggerating and it's all going to be okay. And then we actually hit this point. We hit the point where South Africa is taking the land. We hit the point where young right-wingers are being detained and banned from countries for their opinions. I think this is the beginning of something far, far darker and harsher happening. And if 3 of us can be banned in just 1 week, I mean, what's to come? What's to come? Are all of our Orwellian fears really being materialized right now?
It is a big moment, and it is a moment of transition, and it is lines being drawn, and it is people being pushed to more and more difficult places, emotionally, psychologically, from an activism or movement standpoint. It is a shutdown on people getting together. It is a shutdown on free speech. It is a shutdown on organization. And of course, if it had happened to left-wing journalists, there would be a huge outcry. And of course, there is to some degree. And of course, there are some people who are celebrating as if somehow what's happening to you, what happened to Martin, what happened to Brittany is not also going to happen to them as well. Like to everybody who's like, oh yeah, well, you know, they're racist and blah. This word, like whatever pejorative they're throwing at people like you and others, they're going to throw at anyone they disagree with, which is going to be everyone eventually. And so this is the time where you really have to stand up on principle. And even if you disagree with what Lauren is doing or other people or what I'm doing, this is where you have to stand up on principle, because it will not stop here unless there is real pushback in a legal and peaceful way, real pushback against just this kind of putting your finger on the scale. This is not neutral. I mean, you got 400 jihadis coming back after fighting for ISIS. Welcome back into the United Kingdom. Here's some welfare. Here's some free stuff. You know, you're welcome back. You can reintegrate and so on. It's not going to stop. At this point, it is only going to continue, and it is only going to expand. And it is time for people to really sit up and see what is going on.
It makes me think back to when you had people like Richard Spencer banned from the UK, and of course Michael Savage and a few others, Pamela Geller. And many people, even within my own sphere, were like, Richard Spencer, he kind of deserves it. But yeah, it made it to me. I'm not Richard Spencer. Most people don't put us in the same category, but the story of first they came for the white nationalists is not just a silly set of lines. It is manifesting itself in reality quite visibly right now. And it's very funny. I have blue checkmark verified liberals all over my timeline on Twitter right now, of course, praising this, saying, oh, it's so ironic that people who are border restriction advocates are being restricted at the border and not allowed in the country. At what point did I say I think people who love the culture, speak the language, are entering legally, and want to contribute to society should be banned? At what point? Never. Never. And they're just gloating in this censorship. They're gloating in this totalitarian act by their government. And this is something that is already used against left-wing individuals. This is something that is already used against to silence people on their side, but they don't care because they just get to make that cheeky tweet. They get to make that sassy remark, and that's what matters to them. And it's sick. It's really, really sick, and it's sad to see them misinterpreting it so vastly and not taking the implications of this more seriously. I mean, Brittany and Martin were held for 3 days in an actual prison. That shouldn't happen to anyone. That's insanity. If not anyone, I mean anyone who is innocent, just for their speech. It blows my mind.
This is the great challenge, of course, that the left is going to face. And it has to do with the supposed Muslim ban that Trump was talking about, which of course was banning people without verifiable paperwork, with no real security apparatus, from a list of countries drawn up by the Obama administration. And they say, well, you can't ban people based upon an ideology. That's wrong. That's immoral. You cannot ban people based upon what they believe. And all of the outrage that was raised about the supposed Muslim ban, which wasn't, banning people based upon what they believe, now it's time for the left to have some consistency with what they're saying and stand up and say to the British government, it is wrong to ban people for what they believe. That is putting your fingers on the scale of ideology, and that is totalitarian in its essence.
Well, it looks like they don't like to acknowledge just how similar, in some senses, they are to the right. They do believe in banning people who they think ruin their leftist utopia. They do believe in keeping people out who ruin what they want to see as their culture. But they are not Western culture. Their ideology of progressivism is not what built up the UK. It's not what gave people the rights they have today. They are not the ones that... It reminds me of that thing from Rules for Radicals, where Gandhi's party immediately banned hunger strikes after they got power, because they're totally fine as long as it's being used against the people they hate. And as soon as it's the other way, it's wrong and it's immoral and it's evil. There's no consistency, like you're saying.
Well, and it reminds me as well, if you look at the sort of communist revolutions, how the revolution always ends up eating its own children. And how it's like, well, surely we can throw counter-revolutionaries in jail. Well, sure, we all hate counter-revolutionaries. Guess what? Everyone's a counter-revolutionary, and they all end up in gulags. They'll get you to hate someone, slap a label on them, then expand that label to include everyone, and then suddenly you have no rights really left at all. And the idea that you get stopped on a terrorism suspicion charge, and then it's like, oh, we found a way to have you not be in the country, so off you go. Suddenly the terrorism thing doesn't matter anymore. That is, to me at least, from the amateur outside eye, just ridiculously transparent. They don't want you in the country. They don't want you causing trouble. And what that means, of course, is that there are elements within the UK that they believe will cause trouble if you and Tommy get together, or if you and Brittany get together, or Martin. And so they just don't want people getting together who might raise questions or might bring arguments and data to bear that might go against a particular direction the country is going in, and they simply want to push back against that. And you, as the people who are stopped, and not say the jihadis, means that whoever's the most reasonable is going to get banned.
Mm-hmm. And also because I think we cause trouble for them, and the current state of things and the establishment's inertia that they have in this progressive direction. Now, I do want to mention that I don't want to be the forever conservative having the boot stomped in my face victim. There are some things that we are trying to do about this. I've been speaking to legal representatives. It looks like there's some opportunity to push back against this. We've had amazing support, Brittany, Martin, and I, from most of the right-wing community who are 100% backing free speech, and that's very cool to see. Even big figures like Phil DeFranco saying this is utterly insane. So the world has not all lost their mind, which gives me a lot of hope, even if the government certainly has and those in power have. But this is downstream of culture, as Andrew Breitbart famously said. And while the culture is still it's moving in our direction, we're winning over Generation Z, it seems that we may be able to compete with some of this stuff. And I'm talking to my legal representative right now, and we'll see how that goes, meeting up with Brittany and Martin to try to compete against this, because there were a lot of things that were highly out of order that were done to us that will be very questionable in a courtroom.
Yeah, well, I guess just another example of how diversity is a strength. And the other thing, too, is that it's really hard to know, at least for me, tell me what you think, Laura, it's really hard for me to know what to call people like us. I mean, of course, there's lots of pejoratives and lots of labels, conservative, right-wing, neo, this, far extreme, blah, blah, blah. But basically, I think we're just interested in human freedom. We're interested in allowing people to make their own choices free of coercion. We're interested in free speech. We're interested in engaging people in an intellectual and verbal and argumentative level. And people, of course, are going to try and characterize that as somehow right-wing. And I have to correct people all the time. I don't consider myself right-wing. I'm not a conservative. I mean, I am very interested in human freedom. I'm very interested in minimizing the coercive nature and power of the state. And I'm very interested in free speech. But I just sort of want to point out, and let me know what you think, the labels are there to sort of alienate us and push us to some other place on the sort of field of humanity. Oh, they're over there. They're the different color. They wear a different stripe on their jerseys. They're bad thinkers. They're wrong thinkers. And it's free. You can hate them. You can label them. You can box them in. And then when the rights are taken away, it's like, well, we didn't like them anyway. But we have very great common cause with all people interested in human freedom, with all people who are interested in freedom of speech. And don't let people other you. Don't let people give you these labels. Don't just believe the labels that are put on people. Figure out what they're actually saying. We might have a lot more in common with people than they think.
Yeah, the labels of far right is what every single headline says about me, whether it's from the right or the left. The left tend to say alt-right more, but I kind of shrugged it off. I'm like, well, call me what they want. It's what can I do about it? But it's very true. When I sit down with anyone, left or right, we end up agreeing on far more than we disagree on in most cases. Because truly, maybe the way I say things is a little different. Maybe I'm a little more blunt than others. Maybe I'm not as convoluted in giving my reasons for why I want closed borders. But if you really sit down, have a hot chocolate with me and talk about it, I think anyone who disagrees with me vehemently or thinks I'm some fascist Nazi would really get along with me a lot better. In fact, the Kent police that had me detained, we had some laughs and were enjoying talking. I know they got orders from higher ups to do a lot of the questioning, so it wasn't entirely their fault. But the people that had taken me in to interview me as a terrorist, we were getting along just fine, laughing, bantering, agreeing. And no, I hate that I even had to specify this in the room there. I don't want to kill anyone. I don't want to run over anyone with cars. That is absurdity. I think that's evil. I think that's horrific. That's horrible. Just like you, I want more freedom. And unfortunately, I think that freedom is something that needs to be defended. It's that classic saying of, we don't lock our doors because we hate the people outside, but because we love the people inside. And there are some steps that must be taken to preserve that. And if that's a radical view, so be it. But I don't think too many people would think that's insane.
Well, and of course, there are other people who are saying, oh, you want closed borders and now you're not allowed into a country. Well, you could easily flip that around and say, well, what about all the people who want open borders who are cheering at you not being allowed into a country? Is it just open borders if you have the right ideology? Actually, that probably is kind of true, come to think of it. But the amount of hypocrisy there is astonishingly high. There are more people protesting or getting upset about some small government, free market people coming into a country than literally battle-hardened ISIS fighters with jihadist intentions. If that doesn't give people pause about how far we've drifted from our actual ideals as a Western society, boy, I don't know what will.
Right, and the things that were used, the reasons that were used to deny myself, Brittany, and Martin access to the UK were not policies that I would support anyways. I would not support detaining someone and kicking them out of the country because they once made a joke poster to test a theory. Like, I would not support that. That's insanity. I don't care if they were making a joke poster the other way around, like the Vice writers who said, is Jesus gay? I think they should damn well be allowed in the UK, damn well be allowed in my country, Canada. And I don't think Brittany or Martin would want black identitarian activists to be banned from the UK either. This is not an inconsistent position that we have on immigration. We want battle-hardened ISIS fighters not allowed in the country because they're going to behead our friends and family. That's not a crazy position. So to think that this is somehow hypocritical of us is very, very, very silly, in my opinion.
Well, and how much would people actually agree with the idea or the argument that human beings are always going to have disagreements, and people are going to have great cases on just about every hexagonal side of an issue, and the way that we should resolve it is words, not swords. Keep the S out of human interaction, words, not swords. And if we do not allow people to resolve their disputes according to words, eventually, sooner or later, it will escalate to violence. And the free speech is the way you stop that escalation to violence. And of course, if we can have a peaceful, reasonable, negotiated settlement to human disputes, isn't that infinitely preferable to coercion, either on the private or the public sphere? I mean, so many people would fundamentally agree with us. You know, if you have a conflict with your spouse, you don't pull out your magnum and try and resolve it that way. You use your words, like everyone was taught when they're in grade 1. Use your words, not your fists. And this argument that it is somehow an incitement to violence to disagree with certain groups is actually completely false. Groups should always be subject to criticism, just as you are, just as I am. Groups should always be subject to criticism. That's how we all improve, individually and collectively. And if you're going to ban people from coming in, then you're the one starting the fight. They're the ones who are blocking you by force from lawfully going as a lawful citizen into a country to perform lawful actions, such as talk to people about ideas and talk to the citizenry about ideas. There is a victim. Here, I think the victim is the peaceful people like you and Martin and Brittany, who simply wanted to go and speak with people they are curious about and talk about ideas that move you, motivate you. And it is the other people who are calling for force to be used to prevent you from doing that. And we do not want to give people that kind of power to start letting people in and out of a country based upon some ideology that is peaceful in its essence.
Right. And that's one of the great shames, as you say. I think many people would agree with us if they heard us. Most of my generation, they discount our ideas not because they genuinely disagree with us, but because the ideas have been set before them on our enemies' terms, so to speak, on progressives' terms. They've defined what nationalism is. They've defined what freedom is. They've defined what free speech is for these people and handed that to them. And they never get to hear our ideas for themselves. They've never got to hear our whole interviews, our whole YouTube videos. They get to hear the little sliced up pieces of the worst takes. And they certainly don't get to hear people like Martin or Brittany at Speaker's Square, one of the oldest spots of free speech in the UK, where you had even George Orwell stand there and speak his mind. They don't get to hear it in the first place. So how would they know if they agree with us or not? How would they in the first place? It's very sad. My generation, for the most part, never even had a chance to reject a lot of conservative, right-wing ideas.
Yeah. And I can't help but think of my own family on the British side and the Irish side who fought so valiantly to preserve freedoms within the United Kingdom. And if there was an army of the dead that come back to life and see what their untold levels of suffering had created or produced, I'm not sure they would have been quite as keen to fight that fight even in the first place.
Right. It's greatly depressing how much we spit on our ancestors' graves and the freedoms that they've built up for us. And you know what, you could say it's for some security. What's that great quote? If you give up freedom for some security, you'll lose both and deserve neither, something along those lines. But we're not even doing it for security. Not even for security. We're doing it for... Well, even the legal representative I had said that this may have been expedited because of some political grudge that someone had, because she'd never seen anything go through this quickly. She'd never seen bans just happen like that. And so some political grudges because people are simply salty about other opinions. I don't know. It's certainly not for security, and it's certainly not in favor of freedom. It's something entirely different than that. And it's
Well, I mean, as you know, there's a whole industry that is devoted to calling people like us evil. And once you can dehumanize people and their ideas and their arguments and their data and their evidence, once you can dehumanize people to that degree, once you can get people to believe the label of evil or bigoted or xenophobic or racist or whatever, well, then it's almost like you've unleashed the mob to do what they will. And really that is sort of the point of painting with these broad brushes, very sophisticated and deep arguments. And arguments, you know, I mean, they call far right and so on. This didn't used to be far right. This used to be absolutely mainstream up until even as recently as a couple of decades ago. It was absolutely mainstream that if you have an idea and an argument, you submit it to the public square and you take your chances. And that the best way to get rid of bad ideas is to give them a microphone and a spotlight and let everyone hear the case. This was, like what's called far right or extremist, this was Western culture. Bitterly and hardly won and fought for centuries. Up until a couple of decades ago, this was mainstream. This was what we were all about as a society, using words, not swords, settling disputes in the public sphere, with reason and evidence. This is exactly the Socratic tradition that has been struggling to find its emergence in the West for thousands of years, and did for quite some time do so. It's not far right, it's not extremist, it's not xenophobic, it's not any of these things. It's just freedom. And for everyone who's painted with these labels and everyone who sees these labels, stop and think. Are the people who put these labels on us, do they have your best intentions? Do they have good reason? Do they have good evidence? Or are they riot inciting ad hominem merchants attempting to smear for the sake of discrediting rather than debating, rather than arguing? And if we give up our capacity to argue, we do not give up the inevitability of conflict. We just move it to an entirely different and very uncivilized arena.
It's sad because even amongst the people that support freedom and love freedom, and I'm guilty of this as well, we have to have these precursors to whenever we defend it, where I say, I don't necessarily agree with these people, no matter what you think of these people. I know they're a bit crazy and insane, but we should support freedom. But we have to have all of these kind of safety barriers of making sure we've got some sort of distance from them before we defend their freedom, because it's just such a scary world to even be associated with these lepers of the far right, these lepers of the alt-right, whatever you want to call them. But you're so right in saying that it's just freedom. It's just defending freedom, and you shouldn't have to even bother with these buffers. I do it too sometimes, where I was defending Jada Franzen from going to jail, and I was like, no matter what you think of these people, but I mean, damn, it's just freedom. It shouldn't be so controversial, and we shouldn't have to tiptoe around it so much just to try and defend something that is so integral in our history, and it's so integral in creating peaceful democracies.
Well, and it didn't used to be that. I mean, I certainly remember when I was growing up, there were people who were defending some of the most awful people around, with some of the worst ideas around. And no one in a million years would say, when I was a kid, oh, if this person is defending this horrible group, they must necessarily sympathize and agree with everything that they say. I mean, this was the Voltairean tradition from centuries ago, where Voltaire said, I think it was Voltaire, it's been misattributed a bunch, but that doesn't really matter. The point is that the quote says, I disagree with everything you say, but would defend to the death your right to say it. And this idea that the defense of free speech means that you agree with everything, all the content of the person you're defending, is how they get you. This is, you understand, everyone out there, this is how you'll lose everything. Because they say, well, if you're defending this guy who's terrible, you must be terrible too. And like, well, I don't want to be thought of as terrible. So like, that's how they get you. And then the next guy becomes terrible, and the next woman becomes terrible, and then the next group becomes terrible, and then they're right at your doorstep, and there's so many of them, and you've compromised so much, there's nothing left to say.
It's been a real shame. I've been reading some comments on Philip DeFranco's video, and some of the left-wingers going on there saying, Phil, do you know what you're doing? Lauren Southern associated with this person once, and you're defending her. She's a fascist, this, that, and the other. And, I mean, they're shaming someone just for defending my free speech because I associated with someone else. These are real comments that are getting tons of upvotes on there, and I worry, I do, that the more mainstream will read these and say, oh, well, I better not defend that free speech again. Oh, well, I better not go near that again. I don't want to deal with this criticism. But it's good to see there are still some people out there who, despite the hordes of trolls and left-wingers jeering and laughing and celebrating these bans, they're still sticking up for what's right. And there's been a lot of people, really a lot of great people out there supporting us.
Well, it's the family tree game, right? Where you say, well, you did a show with this person once, you talked to this person once, and you didn't attack them for everything that they said. You tried maybe even to find some common ground with them so that you could have a better conversation or whatever it is. And then it's like, okay, well, because you came into the orbit of this person, you agree with everything they say, and you can keep going that. You know, it's a 6 degrees of evilness. Like, you know, you can always find someone that you can hop, skip, and jump to, or the dominoes that you can hop, skip, and jump to find someone who's got a reprehensible opinion based upon some dominoes that fell, and you can trace that. And I hate to point out that this is not an argument. It is not an argument to say, you, your cousin's brother's roommate's daughter's duck owner, said.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Basically, get the point. And you got the story straight from Lauren Southern of how she was detained. And some people are like, oh, you know, this is just because it's alt-right, American alt-right, and they're just trying to keep that out of their country. I've heard that argument already. I'm like, yeah, this goes beyond alt-right. This goes beyond alt-right for the simple fact it's not happening just to outsiders. Britain's been clamping down on this for a few years now, that they're starting to censor any critical speech of what they're doing when it comes to their immigration. They're using, oh, it's racist to say it's bad. Listen, I don't care what race they are or what religion. If they're coming from a war zone that has been radicalized with ideology that they need to infiltrate Western countries to take them out because they're the devil, basically. Yeah, I don't care if they're Christian, white, black, you know, Muslim, Hindu, whatever you want to claim yourself to be. We got to make sure that definitely in war zones that we're not just taking anyone. You know, you wouldn't want, okay, you know, Germany under Hitler. You wouldn't have wanted a whole bunch of Nazis blending in with the Jews that you're trying to get out of the country because they're being killed off. You wouldn't have been like, oh, yeah, you just let all the Germans in that want to come in. No, we're at war with them. You don't let them in. Well, these countries have basically been at war with the radical Islamists over in these countries, and they're going, just let all of them in. But that wouldn't have happened. But, because we haven't actually declared war, it's not a country that we're at war with, it's ideology. Therefore, whatever BS you want to spin, you're doing exactly what it would have been like if we would have tried to get all the Jews out. And you know what? Just in our attempt to get all the Jews away from the problem, we'll just let all Germans in and not check any of them. No, actually, we went to a whole nother extreme, which was BS in World War II. We rounded up Japanese Americans. That's just as bad. It seems there's no middle ground. Either we'll just go after all of the Muslims, or we won't go after any of them. Well, no. Let's bring the good ones over that are trying to get away from war, that want a better life, that see the culture in America or the culture in a European country and go, that's the culture I want to be a part of. Because it makes no sense to move people that want to hold on to a culture that has led to that radical nature. You don't want to, just transplant the culture and think, well, now that we took it from the Middle East and we put it in a European country, all of a sudden that ideology is just going to be all kinds of better. Probably not. And I'm not talking about the religion. I'm not talking about Muslims. I'm talking about the radical ideology. By not checking and going, well, even, we'll just let them all in and, well, we'll catch the radical ones when they do something radical. But they've already done radical things. Most of these radicals are already linked to radical groups. You could have checked them before they came in. And don't think they don't know who a lot of these people are. Or how they can find out who a lot of these people are. They choose not to. And I'm someone that I'm for, immigrants from any country. as long as they're coming here because of our culture. If they're just running away from whatever, but they're going, oh, I want to come to your country, but I don't want to be a part of your country or your culture. To me, that's not okay. That's forcing cultures. That I wouldn't want someone from California to come here and try to change the culture here to fit their California culture. The same California culture that they might have been running from because it bankrupt their country and it really or bankrupt their state. Oh yeah, we're bankrupt. There's unless you're a star, there's no good job. So I'm going to move here, but I want that California culture here. Well, go back to California. It's that easy. I wouldn't think that most people in California would want me to move there and say, we're going to change your whole culture to the culture from my state. I'm in a pro-gun state. I'm in a pretty conservative state. I don't think the liberals out there want it. But they're not afraid to push their culture onto me. Force their culture onto me. But this is why, this whole free speech thing over in Britain's and the political correctness has now gone where we've warned that it's going to go. Oh, we want to stop racism. Well, yeah, I would like to stop racism too. So you're not allowed to criticize anything from those people. What, excuse me? Then you're going to incite racism. I'm always open to criticism about history of white people. I'm open to criticism about current things with white people. I'm open to hear it. Doesn't mean I always agree. I'm open to hear it. Because those people have a right to speak. I'm willing to at least listen. I might turn it off halfway through because, well, I think maybe some of the stuff coming out of that person's mouth might be just no basis. But I'll at least try to listen. But you better be, factual and legit about what you're talking about. Like watching a liberal talk about gun rights. Well, I'll try to listen. And I might actually listen to someone if they understood what the hell they were talking about. But when I get, halfway through it and they're calling every part on the gun the wrong part and damn grip on the barrel they're trying to say is the suppressor, or a sight on the end of the rifle is a suppressor. Excuse me? Or I like, silencer. When they call a flash suppressor a silencer. That don't silence a damn thing. It just kind of deflects the flash. Well, I had this article from Heritage Foundation, heritage.org, and I like some of what they post, and I read quite a bit. I disagree with some of the stuff they post too. But this one I found pretty interesting after I had seen all the information about Lauren Southern and Brittany. I came across this article, and it was from February 9th. Again, Heritage Foundation, heritage.org. And it's Europe's war on free speech. And then right below it has a picture of a concentration camp, Auschwitz. It says here, right under it, a Polish law would make it punishable with a fine to use terms such as Polish death camps when referring to concentration camps like Auschwitz. The article goes to say, any American who ever questioned whether the First Amendment is vital to protect free speech should just cast a glance across the Atlantic. Europeans share the same values we do. Indeed, our concept of rights derives from European philosophers, and yet they often adopt misguided laws that circumscribe freedom of expression. The latest blunder comes courtesy of Poland, which is in the midst of passing one of the silliest laws ever devised. President Andrzej Duda signed a law Tuesday that makes it illegal to accuse Poland of complicity in Nazi crimes, including the Holocaust. The law would also make it punishable with a fine to use terms such as Polish death camps when referring to concentration camps like Auschwitz and Treblinka, which were located within Nazi-occupied Poland. Former President Barack Obama deeply offended Poland when he used the term in 2012 and later apologized. He was good at apologizing. And that's because he goes off of ideology that looks at a world without America. He truly is trying to get to the point where the world no longer has the America we know. But that's a whole side note. Like all these other laws, the intention is undoubtedly honorable. Poland takes extreme umbrage at being associated with the terror that was the Holocaust. But Poland must understand that the way to fight misleading information is not to ban it, but to counter it with good information. It is moreover perfectly legitimate to query about the extent to which non-Germans collaborated with Nazi crimes in Poland, France, and the rest of Europe, and in fact the world. To attempt to chill that debate is ill-advised. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, which is no longer Secretary of State, struck the right tone when he said that the Polish law adversely affects freedom of speech and academic inquiry. Tillerson further added in a statement the United States reaffirms that terms like Polish death camps are painful and misleading. Such historical inaccuracies affect Poland, our strong ally, and must be combated in ways that protect fundamental freedoms. We believe that open debate, scholarship, and education are the best means of countering misleading speech. Poland is but the latest European country to ban freedom of expression it finds uncomfortable. Many of these speech codes and laws have to do with the trauma of Nazi legacy, but others extend far beyond that. In the United Kingdom, for example, the Public Order Act 1986 prohibits the expression of racial hatred, which is defined as hatred against a group of persons by reason of the group's color, race, nationality, including citizenship, or ethnic or national origins. People have been fined and jailed both for expressing religious objections to the gay lifestyle or, at the other end, for displaying anti-religious bigotry. I want to define that. In UK, anti-religious bigotry, you can trash Christians over in the UK and they don't do nothing about it. Say one bad thing about Islam and you're going to jail. Or fined. Or both. And then you're put on a list. And that needs to be pointed out not only because of Democrats' attempts to curb free speech, but also what Trump could possibly do, which you might like right now, but you ain't going to like when the other president or the next president is in power. And that's going after fake news. We should stop fake news. Well, I believe that we shouldn't watch fake news, but to stop fake news, that's an undertaking that I don't think most people are realizing right offhand. Don't attack free speech. come back with better arguments. And a lot of times that's why the left wants to censor free speech. Sorry. Issue here. Okay. But if we're not careful, we're going to follow the trend, which we definitely have the left always trying to do. It's follow the trend of European countries. We want to be more like Europe. Well, that's because they're elites and they look at European elites. Well, the European elites get so much, and well, that's because the middle class and the poverty, the people in poverty, have no chance of moving out of that situation. Which I don't want to say no chance, but it's a very small chance. And the more accepting of the radical views of the radical Muslims or Islamists, I don't even like to say Muslim because it's really radical Islamist. Not all Muslims are radicals. A lot of good Muslims out there. I've met them. Went to school with them. And they're doing a real good job of creating chaos, whether it be the immigration in Europe, the stirring of racism in America, along with the immigration problem. None of this is helping. It's not helping the people that are coming into the countries. They might, I got a home that's not being bombed, but they're in the culture that spawned a lot of the conflicts. You got to realize these conflicts have been going on before United States or Russia or, a lot of these other countries started, doing things over in the Middle East. A lot of people wanted to go over there to try to create peace, but we know interfering doesn't create peace because then you got to pick a side, which only inflames the other side more. I'll put one here. It says, in France in 1990 passed a law that also made it a crime to deny the Holocaust. So you can't question the Holocaust, but you can't bring it up. Let's just not talk about the Holocaust. Hey, that might be what they are hoping for. Because you know what? If we can rewrite history, we can repeat it easier. And again, back to mainstream media. Mainstream media isn't covering any of this. Why? Because they want to push the same laws, the same construct of government that you're seeing over there in Europe. So what do they want you to think of Great Britain? The prince and the new princess to be, and the son of the prince and princess. The daughter. Look at the royals. Isn't it a fairy tale? Yeah, it really is. For every other person in the UK being a prince, a queen, or a king, yeah, that's pretty much out of reach. So it is a fairy tale. If I wanted to be more like Europe, I'd have moved to Europe. There's rights that we have here that allow for us to express and be free that you won't get in Europe. And if we continue to go down this road, we're going to end up like Europe. People in the trailer park are going to be stuck in the trailer park, except for the one or two exceptions. They're just so smart that, well, of course, they're going to recruit them. And then they're going to be like, look, you're the only one that was smart enough to make it out. Oh, you know, these people are so dumb. You know, you're so much smarter than them. No, that person was just the one person you allowed, or the two people you allowed to be a part of your group, because you can use them. And then you manipulate them to make them feel better, make them feel smarter, to make them feel more important, so they don't question why no one else moved up with them in the ranks. And it's getting really hard to get interviews and other information out of Great Britain now. They are shutting down a lot of journalists that are trying to question. Journalists in Great Britain can't just go questioning Islam anymore. They can't try to bring up legitimate problems anymore. And then when our journalists, like and activists or commentary people, try to get into the UK to expose it, to shed light on it, they're banned. There's another problem with how social media and these governments spying on people, how bad it's gotten. That they know who you are before you even go. That person might speak out against us. We can't let them in the country. We can't let them expose. Multiple people have been stopped going into Great Britain and kicked out. Okay, I do want to move along. I didn't realize how far we were getting into the broadcast here. I want to cover some here locally with Google, and we'll get into a quick Ron Paul Liberty report, and we'll talk about this. Google and Geek Squad, arms of the deep state, and it's basically come out that they kind of are arms of the deep state because, well, we already knew about, Google and that, but Geek Squad has even come under because, well, you allow them to come in and fix your computer. If they see any questionable stuff, they'll just go ahead and send it. Now law enforcement doesn't need a warrant because you allowed them on your computer, and whatever they found, well, they can turn it over. Excuse me? No, you still need a warrant. They stole information. Most people aren't giving them, permission to take information off their computer. They're saying, "Hey, fix it." Well, now if you have anything that's questionable, they might turn you in. So let's get into this real quick.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Doing very well,
Good.
and we'll be talking about our privacy and whether the government's doing a very good job in protecting our privacy, because that's one of the responsibilities. The Fourth Amendment, they wanted to make sure that nobody would be intruding and the government wouldn't be allowed to do it. But here we have found more evidence, and we should be shocked to find out what our government is doing. And there are two stories out just recently. One is with Google that They work with the CIA and our Pentagon on this Project Maven, and that is helping the military to analyze drones and, artificial intelligence, which is very, very significant because obviously it's not done with anybody's permission. But then the second issue that we'll touch on today, which is related, is the Geek Squad and what Best Buy is doing. But on this issue of what Google is doing, and this is related to the artificial intelligence. But the whole thing is, it's a private company. We know the origin of Google, which was quite controversial. But all of a sudden now they're working very, very closely, with the military in developing weapons. As a matter of fact, this all essentially puts them into the military-industrial complex because they're looking at different ways of spying on people. And of course, whose interest does this serve? It's the government, but not for the good. It's not for the good of the people. So once again, this is another attack on the privacy of the American people, and big corporations are involved. Is it corporatism? Is it fascism? Or is it just good old free market economy going on here? But it's a big deal, and we know that Google really didn't originate totally in the marketplace, and they've been beholding, to the government in a large manner. And in the media now, there's a lot of criticism of what Google is going, but we also know that there's a lot of good employees at Google, and we know them, and they've been friendly, and they have. A lot of people believed, and I did, and it's still probably the case, that many libertarians are inclined to work for a company like Google. And we've had that support, and I've spoken, to groups of employees at Google and found it very fascinating. But still, the officials, it's a different story. So I just wonder what you've considered about this. This obviously is not a very positive thing happening of what has been revealed this past week.
It is a chilling thing, and the leadership, obviously, of Google, the top managers, the top leaders are not, the average employee can't control what they do. But, the issue is that the Pentagon acquires tons and tons of drone footage, and it has to figure out how to analyze it, whether they're targeting someone in Afghanistan or Pakistan or whatever they're doing. And so what Google is teamed up with them is to help develop artificial intelligence, intelligence that learns as it goes to help better track these targets. There's tons and tons of data that they're getting. Well, Google claims in its own defense that this is not related to combat issues. This is something else. It's Project Maven. But the question is really, because here's the full name of the Project Maven, which doesn't sound too bad. This one sounds kind of bad. Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team. That sounds pretty bad. So what Maven does is it provides the Pentagon with the abilities to track people as they come and go from different locations. So you think about how that can be used in other settings. I think that's where it gets chilly.
I just wonder how they do this. Does Google have a contract with the government to get reimbursed for this? Or is it sort of like Google is part of the government and they don't do any reimbursements with them? But Google obviously isn't a private company that does voluntary work for the Pentagon. But it is chilling, and it's very annoying because there's the defense issue and why do we have to have all this information? And then there's the issue which is so important, and that is the privacy issue. And what does this do to our privacy? Because this just unleashes thing. And it isn't so much that Google's here helping with this military operation, but Google also works closely with our government because of the information they accumulate. And this massive amount of information on everybody. And this, of course, has nothing to do with a foreign enemy. This has to do with government control of the people, and what the people are doing. And it's almost like an obsession of knowing everything about everybody, and you wonder what their motivations are, other than the fact that they're authoritarians and they don't want anybody doing anything that they don't approve of.
libertarians had hoped with the rise of these big tech companies that they would provide a counterbalance to the government's ability to surveil us and all these things. But we also know with Amazon, which gets billions of dollars from the CIA providing cloud computing services and other services. So what we had hoped would happen, as libertarians hoped would happen, has not happened. And Google claims this is no big deal, it's just a partnership, it's nothing. But what happens is more and more of their revenue, it's a money-making company. As more and more of its revenue, as more and more of Amazon's revenue comes from the U.S. government versus coming from a customer who can vote with his dollars, then who are they going to be responsive to? Are they really going to care that much about our privacy if the bulk of their money is coming from the federal government?
And now there was talk about Amazon going into the banking business. But there was another story out this week, somewhat related, and that has to do with Best Buy and the Geek Squad and the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Had filed a Freedom of Information Act, and they got some information that I don't know how big this is, but just the idea of it happening is alarming because you want to know how much. And that is, if you take your computer in, the way I understand it, and they send it off to one of their facilities to be analyzed, that if they just inadvertently or casually find something on there that the CIA or the FBI might like and the government wants, they obviously have a deal. The FBI actually even visited one of those places, for Best Buy and where this operates, where the operation occurs. So they've done that, and this to me is so much suggestive of getting the American people to spy on their neighbor and their friends, and even the worst part, spying on families. And you hear stories about young kids talking about their parents doing something that was not environmentally friendly, and then stirring up trouble like that. But this is just sort of opening up so much that just you can't even send your computer to go send off. So who knows what it'll be. Now, the one example they used was, very controversial on what kind of pictures he was looking at. But what if it had a tax issue? What if it had a drug issue? And what if it's a miscalculation? What if it's some information on there that's a terrorist issue but there's no search warrants for sure.
Yeah, that's the chilling thing, is that this Geek Squad, or at least employees of the Geek Squad, had developed a relationship with the FBI whereby the people who are analyzing your computer, you bring your computer, and the people who are analyzing it have a relationship with the FBI whereby they are paid if they find something bad on your computer. And it's difficult to defend because some of these things they found are pretty awful things. However, there's no warrant involved. You have the federal government secretly developing, even they call it confidential human sources, within a private company. The question becomes at some point, and there's a couple of questions, I think. First of all, was the FBI training these Geek Squad people how to find this stuff? And B, the incentives. If you're some guy making a couple bucks an hour, 10, 15 bucks an hour, whatever they make, the FBI comes along and says, hey, $1,000 if you find something bad. What if they start planting these things? They're planting them.
And they also hide behind the law, local law and different laws, because if an individual comes across a crime permitted and you've heard certain things said, and some crimes might be you're using drugs or something like that there shouldn't be laws against anyway. If you see that, you are obligated. Doctors are under those pressures about what happens when a person comes to the emergency room. And sometimes teachers are under these obligations if they hear a student talking about their dad has a gun at home, But it's true in medicine, it's true in education, that as long as you hear something, that you're obligated to do it. So they can use all kinds of excuses on why they have to turn this in and make it sound like they're on the moral high ground, rather than saying, well, it's none of our business. I wouldn't think this would be very good for Best Buy's business.
Yeah, I can't imagine it is. Who wants to take your computer in to get fixed? But, the thing is that I was going to ask you about the different philosophical view of that somehow these companies more and more are going to the government, getting into bed with the government. What does that say about our country?
I would say it says something about the human nature, because I think a little bit of that went on when the railroads got involved with our government.
True.
So it happens. Big corporations and money tend to come together, unfortunately, and it's persistent. And that's why supposedly our Constitution was supposed to be unique and try to prevent that. But even the railroad influence, with government, the government influence on the railroad and the giveaways and all the subsidies, and of course the railroads that got that benefit went bankrupt. But no, I think it's a lot of human nature, and it's just so massive now because we have a government not designed for the protection of liberty, but to police the world. And it's this obsession and this idea that we have this moral obligation to spread our goodness. And I keep wondering, where is our goodness? And when we do these, when our government's doing this to us and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're supposed to be minding their own business and allowing us to mind our own business, and yet there is this temptation. I think it has a lot to do with human nature, but I think it is also this conditions that make it real ripe. I think, take for instance, the military-industrial complex. And this is part of it, This is military, and some of this stuff with drones. Those are military weapons that they're dealing with, and there's a lot of bucks made in this. My guess is that people who participate and give this service for artificial intelligence are making big money and getting big money out of from the government and from the taxpayers, and part of the reason why we have this huge debt. So I think it's the love of liberty that is lost, and that when there's less love of liberty, then the shortcomings of mankind, the immoral temptations, overwhelm. And right now, I think we're in a mess because that seems to be the upper hand right now. There's more and more of that because over these decades now, there's become more dependency on government, and they do it out of necessity. What are these airplane companies going to do if they can't build military weapons? Thousands of people are going to be laid off. You saw the lobbyists in Washington.
Oh, yeah.
It's a culture. It's a culture, but that's why I'm pessimistic on us becoming all of a sudden more moralistic because I think it's so entrenched. This combination of big business and government is going to last until we go bankrupt. Then we'll have another chance. As long as we and others keep trying to get people to understand why they're much better off if they support the cause of liberty rather than the cause of big government cooperation with big business. And that's epidemic right now.
Well, I think I'd like to close by, first of all, tipping our hats to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Thank goodness for organizations like this. We hope they continue to hold out for our privacy. But I would just briefly spin a dystopian tale, I think, because who would have thought a few years ago with the rise of the Internet and all these different Internet companies that there would be a crackdown on dissenters, on alternative media, on groups that don't take for example, in the foreign policy realm, don't take the line that we should be having an aggressive foreign policy overseas. Now a lot of these organizations are finding themselves silenced by the social media. So what happens in the future when you have Google in bed with the government and you've already identified alternative sources not as different points of view, but as threats, as disinformation, as foreign-funded disinformation? At what point is that targeting going to be turned inward toward us, patriotic Americans who oppose our current foreign policy, who defend civil liberties? It may sound far-fetched in the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happens sooner than we think.
Very good. And I, too, have been a little bit disappointed. I make no claims that I'm a computer expert, nor do I understand all the technology, but I, too, was very excited about what was happening, believing that we would circumvent some of the intrusions into our privacy by our government and that we could circumvent what they do. But it turns out that too often they become part of the government, makes it more difficult. So, all this advancement in technology so often could be used for the betterment of mankind, but too often is used for making it much worse. I think of that about weaponry and all the technology. So often the weaponry and the technology is used to enhance war, and we sort of were talking about that right now, about how technology is used to spy on the American people. So I think that the human race has advanced so tremendously over the last 400 or 500 years, even 200 years. Just think of the advancement. But so often the technology has been used to regulate the people, undermine our liberties, fight more wars, rather than just advancing the understanding that would advance the human culture and human nature and the human condition. So it, to me, is so much of a disconnect. Such fantastic advancements technologically, and we're still probably in the deep, deep dark ages when it comes to human conditions, and maybe that's what life is all about. But I think understanding it first is important, then working for the possibility that maybe mankind can improve and move toward a society that works for peace and prosperity over more war and authoritarianism. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube, while YouTube still allows them to broadcast there. Because we know YouTube's owned by Google, and Google and YouTube have been going, along with other social media sites, have been going after what they consider right-wing people. And this has been going on, and this goes back to Google and governments, and it's not just the United States government. This is, China, the UK. You wonder how they get the information on people like Lauren Southern. Well, she might be because that she's a little bit known, but Brittany isn't, I don't think, as well known as Lauren Southern. But when you have a giant corporation like Google, international corporation like Google, that is gathering information on anybody that connects to them, whether it be in Germany, the UK, the United States, Canada, Mexico, wherever you are, and you use Google or access Google, guess what? They're keeping records on you. And it's already been out that even if you're logged out of Google and they're still tracking what you do, that should be illegal. That right there should be illegal. If I leave your house, you have every right while I'm in your house or even out in public to see what I'm doing. If I'm out in public, you can film me while I'm out in public. I can't really stop you. Might not like it, but I can't stop you. But the moment I walk into my house and I close my windows, I logged out of the public space or your house. I'm now logged into my personal private space. When I log out of Google, that means, hey, Google, I no longer want to deal with you. I'm logged out. Now what I do on the internet, I shouldn't be, definitely if I'm not even searching through Google, should not be any of your business. And by putting little things in there to spy on people or gather their information after they logged out, after they left your website, that becomes an invasion of privacy. Now you're doing what the cops and government wish they could do. Invade your privacy, invade your Fourth Amendment right without a warrant. Oh, because they're not government, they don't need a warrant? Well, hold on. My neighbor can't just walk into my house and then go to the government and tell them what to do or what I have. Why does Google get an exemption on that? And then they're cooperating with hostile governments. And Great Britain's government's becoming hostile. And I think it would be funny if they banned me. I have bloodlines that go back to the Welsh. Also on my mom's side, my grandfather on my mom's side. That family tree is also connected to someone that is revered by a lot of people in the UK and Great Britain. And I hate trying to even bring that up because then people are like, well, who is it? Who is it? And I'm not someone that goes around just, oh, yeah, I'm related to these people. I'm cool because... No, I don't care. I'm my own person. And just because I'm related to them doesn't mean I agree with everything they've ever done. So I tend not to bring it up because people then, you know, they go into conspiracy theories and, oh, yeah, he's a shill or whatever because he's, you know, a distant cousin of that person. But I think it would be funny if they tried banning me. Because I think at that point, I might actually bring it up. And then ask them, now how do you feel? How do you think your people are going to feel? And you know what? Even though I'm, you know, trying to stand up for the generations of British people that have been there, I will also stand next to the Muslim that's willing to denounce the radicalization of Muslims or Islamists. Because it's not about race. It's not about religion. It's about what's right and wrong. And it seems that everybody will throw out what's right or what's wrong to try to be on the winning side or on the political correctness side. And then you get the other ones, you know, well, I'm against the political correctness, so I'm going to go far this way. Now I'm going to, you know, some of these people, they go, you know, they become racist. They become anti-Semitic. They become, you know, anti-Muslim. Why? Because no one's looking at the truth of what's right and wrong. You're not going, is it right? It's going, well, if I stand against that, I must be here. Or if I stand against that, I got to stand with these people because they're the ones that are against that. My enemy's enemy is my friend. No, not really. How did that work out after World War II? You know, my enemy's enemy is my friend. Yeah. Hey, Russia, Soviet Union, how you doing? You're my friend now because you're enemies with my enemy. And yeah, no, we didn't become friends just because of that, did we? No, we had a whole Cold War afterwards. It's getting to a point where you're going to have to choose. Do you want to join a group, the winning group, the losing group, the counter group? Or do you want to stand for something? Stand for actual principle, what's right, what's wrong? A right to speak or practice a religion you feel like without harming others. The right to defend yourself. Not to attack people, but to defend yourself from an attack. You have a right to not become the government's puppet and be its houser for its soldiers, even though in the Bill of Rights it does give you exception under wartime. But guess what? Katrina wasn't a wartime, and they still did it. Katrina was a natural disaster, but still, military took up homes for their, deployment in that area. Oh, we're going to quarter ourselves here. Oh, we're going to quarter ourselves here. One right that doesn't give an exception, one of the only rights that does not give an exception, is the Second Amendment. You can claim, well, they got their right to do that because, well, there's an exception for this law or this law, like quartering soldiers. Well, if we're under wartime, we could quarter them. You can make those arguments. They haven't been legitimate, definitely in Katrina, for quartering soldiers. But guess what? The Second Amendment says shall not be infringed. It doesn't say but or unless. It says shall not be infringed. Whether it's new gun laws or laws that didn't exist and that were prohibited by the Constitution, like taking guns away from citizens after Katrina. No law, no authority. Still did it. No one spoke out. Well, we got to keep, people from looting and robbing. Well, you can try, but guess what? It still happened. And people that lawfully and legally had their guns taken from them. They had those guns legally and lawfully, and you took them from them. You dragged the old lady out of her home that was not in a flood area and abused her and her rights. And now you have kids that have no actual knowledge of what the Constitution is or why it's there or what it's there for. And we have school systems lying, absolutely lying to students. Not misrepresenting, lying. To push their agenda, they are lying. We got a real problem in this country. And if we don't fix it quick, it don't matter if it's Obama, Trump, Clinton's, Bush's, Sanders. It doesn't matter. If we don't fix it now, there's no going back without a violent revolution or a civil war or a complete collapse of a country, and we just don't know what comes out of any of that. We can get something a hell of a lot worse. And that where society is now, and it seems like they're trying to break down society so they can have that chaos and that collapse to get their order out of chaos. They don't need the president for that. It don't matter what president you have, because they already have their agenda being played out right now. And the people are being taught that authoritarian rule is good through manipulation from a lot of people that are, honestly, if a lot of these professors believe what they're teaching these kids, they are utterly idiots. They're lying to themselves and lying to students because they don't critically think what they've been brainwashed with. if you truly believe communism and socialism is good, you have absolutely zero grasp on history and zero grasp on reality. Why even have America, the United States, if we're trying to be just like Great Britain? Why not just become another colony of Great Britain again? There's something special about America, and that doesn't mean that we're better than all other countries or better than all other people, or, you know, we're not. We just have a system that was created, that was different. The most, really, any other Western country. And it was because of the corruption that a lot of common law was completely ignored over in these countries. A lot of this is based off common or natural law. But what this did when our Constitution and Bill of Rights were written, what it was to do was not to tell what, you know, most countries did, to tell the citizens what they could and couldn't do. We were unique in the fact that we wrote rules for government, not rules for citizens. Other countries wrote rules for citizens. We only wrote rules for government and outlined rights for citizens. And even though I'm not a giant constitutionalist anymore, I'm more of a libertarian, I do see the importance of the Constitution. And I see this a lot in a lot of libertarians. If you're a libertarian, you can't be a constitutionalist. Well, actually, you can. If you look at the Constitution as a stepping stone towards that libertarian ideology. Because there's a lot of libertarian principles that were put forth in that. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than where we're at right now. All of our problems wouldn't be solved if we went back to the Constitution or even a libertarian society. But guess what? You would have the choice to solve them or attempt to solve them. The path we're going now, you're going to have to ask someone else to solve it. You're going to have to ask someone else to defend you. Because if we allow it to keep going down the street, we lose our gun rights, our right to self-defense. No other right will be safe. And they haven't really been. But you think it's bad now? Let them go after the Second Amendment. And if they can successfully attack that, it only gets worse. We start seeing the laws that you're seeing over in Europe. Because guess what? They've already gone after their guns. You gotta have some hell of a connection to be able to get firearms, unless you want to do it illegal. You can still get illegal. Oh yeah, if you want to go to Britain, illegal weapons, oh yeah, you can still get those. Former Soviet Union countries, oh yeah, you can get weapons there. Illegally. There's still shootings there. Oh no, there's no mass shooting. Oh, well yeah, because not every crazy has a gun. Instead, you have higher government laws don't help you. State union,